Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something personal. Have you ever walked away from something or someone, even though it felt right, only to lie awake at night wondering if you made a mistake? Maybe it was quitting a job, ending a relationship, moving to a new city, or choosing a harder path that no one else understood. You felt the loss, but not yet the growth. That's because growth doesn't feel like progress at first. It feels like pain. It feels like confusion, isolation, fear, even grief. We expect growth to feel like a step forward, but often the first step of growth feels like we've lost something, and we've lost comfort, familiarity, who we used to be. But this is the signal we're on the right path. Today, I want to walk you through 5 truths that will help you embrace the discomfort of growth and reframe the loss that comes with it. Let's begin. Think about a snake. When it grows, it must shed its skin. That process isn't pretty. It doesn't happen in a moment of triumph or grace. It happens in discomfort. The snake rubs itself against rough surfaces, peeling away what no longer fits, literally tearing itself free from the skin that once protected it. And for a while, it's vulnerable, exposed, raw. That's growth. What's interesting is that we often think of growth as a purely positive experience. We talk about it with bright language, elevation, evolution, breakthrough, success. But the part no one tells you about is the shedding, that painful middle space between who you were and who you're becoming. The truth is, growth feels like loss at first, as it is loss. We outgrow things, roles, titles, communities, habits, even parts of our personality. And we expect that the transition into something better should feel good, but it doesn't. Not at first. And it's not supposed to. When we let go of something that no longer serves us, even if it was once meaningful, we grieve. That grief is real. But so is the transformation that follows. I have a friend, let's call her Rachel, who spent over a decade building a successful career in marketing. She had everything that on paper signified success. The 6-figure salary, the corner office, the well-known clients, a team that respected her, a boss who relied on her. It was a dream job. At least it used to be. But over time, Rachel started waking up with a weight in her chest. Nothing was wrong exactly, but everything felt off. Her work didn't inspire her anymore. She felt like she was performing a version of herself that no longer felt real. And that disconnect grew louder every day. It wasn't burnout, it was misalignment. She realized she'd grown, but her job hadn't grown with her. So she made a choice. She left. She walked away from stability and a prestigious title to start a wellness company, a complete pivot into an industry where she had no reputation, no safety net, and no guarantees. And for the first 6 months, she cried. Not every day, but often. She missed the rhythm of her old routine. She missed the recognition, the familiarity, the certainty. She questioned herself constantly. Had she made a huge mistake? Had she thrown away a career she had worked so hard to build? She wasn't mourning the job. She was mourning the version of herself that had once felt so secure in that role. Shedding isn't just about removing what no longer fits. It's about honoring what once did. That's what makes it so hard. The things we let go of aren't always bad. Sometimes they were beautiful. Sometimes they served us well. But we grow. And when we grow, we have to let go of what we've outgrown. And that feels like loss. Because it is. But not all loss is bad. Some loss is necessary. It's pruning. Think about how gardeners prune trees. They cut away living parts of the plant, not because they're dead, but because without that pruning, the tree can't thrive. It won't have the resources or the energy to bloom again. And sometimes we need to do the same. We have to let go of something good to make space for something better. When Rachel finally reached her 3rd year in business, something clicked. Her wellness company had not only survived, it had flourished. She was speaking at conferences, building a loyal community, and doing work that actually lit her up. More importantly, she felt aligned, like her inner world and her outer actions were finally in sync. She told me something I'll never forget. She said, "I didn't just leave a job, I left an identity. That's what I was grieving, but I had to shed who I was to become who I am." That's the part no one warns you about. Growth isn't just about adding new things. It's about releasing old ones, things you once loved, people who once understood you, goals that once defined you, comfort zones that once kept you safe. We live in a world obsessed with accumulation. More success, more followers, more milestones, but real growth often comes with subtraction, and subtraction feels like loss. It's why so many people resist change, even when they know it's necessary. The pain of shedding feels bigger than the promise of what might come next. And that's why courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is the willingness to let go without knowing what's on the other side. It's standing in that vulnerable, skinless state and trusting that a stronger, more authentic version of you will emerge. This isn't just about career transitions, it's about everything. It's the person who finally ends a relationship that no longer serves them, not because they don't care, but because they finally do. It's the student who chooses a different major despite disappointing their parents because they've realized their passions lie elsewhere. It's the leader who changes the culture of their organization, knowing full well that not everyone will come with them. In each of these stories, there's a shedding, a loss, a period of uncertainty, but also an emergence. The reason this matters is because we often misinterpret discomfort as danger. We feel the grief, the sadness, the fear, and we assume we're doing something wrong, that we've made a mistake, that maybe we should turn back. But what if that feeling isn't a sign of failure, but a signal of growth? What if the very thing we're resisting is the very thing we need? Because here's the truth, the people who grow the most aren't the ones who always feel confident. They're the ones who choose to move forward, even when it hurts. They choose to shed, even when it leaves them exposed. That moment, when you're standing in the space between what was and what will be, is sacred. It's easy to look back and say, I lost something. But with time, distance, and healing, you begin to see the truth. You didn't just lose, you made room. It cleared space for something more aligned, more meaningful, more you. And eventually, like Rachel, you look back and realize you weren't just changing careers or habits or environments, you were evolving. And like all growth, it came with pain, but it also came with possibility. Shedding hurts, always, but it's the only way to grow. And the gift that comes after, the clarity, the alignment, the integrity of becoming who you're truly meant to be, that gift is worth every tear, every doubt, every sleepless night. So when you feel that discomfort, when you're afraid to let go, remember the snake. Remember that the pain of shedding is not the end. It's the beginning of becoming. We all say we want change. We say we want growth, better lives, more meaning, deeper relationships, fulfilling work. And yet we often find ourselves stuck in the exact same place, year after year. Because while we say we want transformation, what we really crave is familiarity, and familiarity is addictive. It's one of the strongest forces in human behavior. Even when we know something isn't working, even when we feel the slow erosion of our happiness, our creativity, our spirit, we stay. Not because it's right, but because it's known. We stay in jobs that drain us. We stay in relationships that make us feel small. We say yes to routines that leave us numb, not because they inspire us, but because they're predictable. And in the short term, predictable feels safe. But predictable and aligned are not the same thing. There's a quiet kind of suffering that comes from living inside a life that looks fine from the outside, but feels misaligned on the inside. It's the kind of suffering that doesn't erupt loudly. It simmers. It becomes a slow, subtle leak in our energy, in our joy, in our potential. And that leak is everywhere. Take a look at the modern workplace. A recent global study showed that nearly 85% of people feel disengaged at work. That's not 85% of people in toxic environments. That's 85% of people, period, going to jobs every day where they don't feel fully alive, fully seen, or fully used for what they're capable of. That's not just a career problem, that's a human potential problem. And when you dig into why these people stay, the answer isn't lack of opportunity. Many of them could leave. Some of them have offers, side hustles, even passions they dream of pursuing. But they don't, because the fear of the unknown outweighs the pain of staying stuck. That's the real reason we stay small. Not because we're incapable of change, but because we're terrified of stepping into the blank space between what we know and what we don't. There's something deeply comforting about familiarity, even when it's hurting us. Think about it. You know how to survive your current situation. You know how to navigate your boss's moods. You know how to make peace with a partner who no longer listens. You know the rhythm of your uninspiring routine. It may be draining, but it's predictable, and that predictability becomes a kind of safety net. We trick ourselves into believing that stability equals happiness, but in truth, it only equals repetition. There's a famous quote, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. That's the anthem of the stuck. And for a long time it works, until it doesn't. Because familiarity doesn't protect your future, it only protects your comfort. And over time, the cost of staying in the wrong place adds up. Not in dollars, but in dreams deferred. I once worked with a man named Ethan. He had been at the same company for 15 years. He was good at his job, really good. Everyone trusted him. He had status, security, and a parking space with his name on it. But something in him had shifted. He had ideas that no one would listen to. He wanted to innovate, to stretch, to build something of his own. But every time he thought about leaving, a voice inside whispered, why risk it? You've got a good thing here, don't be stupid. So he stayed. Until one day, his 11-year-old son came home from school with a drawing. It was a picture of their family, mom, dad, and 2 kids. But in the drawing, the dad had no mouth. When Ethan asked why, his son said, you don't talk anymore, not like before. That's when it hit him. He hadn't just outgrown his job. He had outgrown the version of himself that had learned how to survive in that environment. And the longer he stayed, the more muted he became, not just at work, but everywhere. Familiarity had become a cage. He didn't quit right away. It took him almost a year. But he did eventually leave, and now he runs a design firm that lights him up in ways his corporate job never could. He's not just more successful, he's more present, more engaged, more alive. That's the thing about growth. It's not just about achievement. It's about aliveness. It's about reclaiming parts of yourself that you had to silence just to stay in the room. And the moment you realize that staying where you are is costing you more than leaving ever could, that's the moment transformation begins. But let's be honest, that moment doesn't feel good. It feels terrifying, because letting go of the familiar means stepping into something uncertain. And our brains are hardwired to avoid uncertainty. In fact, neuroscientists have found that our brains react to uncertainty the same way they react to physical pain. That's why we resist change, even when we logically know it's necessary. It's not weakness, it's biology. But here's where choice comes in. While we may not control our brain's initial reaction, we do control what we do with it. We can choose to let fear steer us, or we can choose to walk with fear into the unknown, trusting that what we find there will grow us more than what we left behind. And the discomfort, it's temporary. You won't always feel unsure. You won't always feel like you're floating in limbo. But regret has a way of lingering. Regret builds its own quiet room inside your spirit, and it whispers to you every time you think about what could have been. So the choice becomes simple, not easy, but simple. You want the pain of growth or the pain of staying stuck? Because make no mistake, both come with pain, but only one leads to freedom. I think of a woman I met at a workshop. Her name was Lila. She had spent 2 decades in an industry that no longer fulfilled her. She knew it was time to move on, but she couldn't imagine starting over at 45. Her fear that she'd be too far behind, too out of place, too late. And yet, the more she stayed, the smaller she felt. One day she said something I'll never forget. If I have to rebuild myself anyway, I'd rather do it for a future I believe in than a past I'm trying to preserve. We don't grow by clinging, we grow by releasing. By loosening our grip on the familiar, not because it's all bad, but because it's no longer right. And yes, it feels like loss, it feels like uncertainty, it feels like stepping into a hallway with no clear door, but eventually light comes in. New doors open, you meet new versions of yourself, stronger, braver, clearer. The kind of person who doesn't just survive their life, but builds it deliberately, courageously, and fully awake. Because growth never begins in the comfort zone. It begins the moment you realize that what's familiar might be safe, but it's no longer serving you. And that realization, that's your invitation, not just to change, but to become. No one tells you this, but it's true. Every transformation has a grieving period. We talk about growth like it's a straight line up, like this exciting, celebratory, feel-good experience. And sometimes it is, but very often what comes first isn't joy, it's loss. Not because you've made a wrong turn, but because you've started to become someone new. And every time you become someone new, you have to leave something behind. And leaving, even when it's right, hurts. When you grow, you grieve. Not always in dramatic ways, not always with tears or breakdowns. Sometimes it's subtle. It's that moment of silence in a place that used to feel full. It's that pang in your chest when you open a message from someone who no longer really knows you. It's the odd emptiness in your day when a routine you once relied on is suddenly gone. You grieve the version of you that didn't yet carry the burden of new awareness. You grieve the comfort of the life you once understood, the people who made sense in that chapter, the simplicity that existed before growth brought complexity. I remember when I moved to a new country full of hope and possibility. It was something I'd looked forward to for months. I told myself it would be exciting, freeing, expansive, and it was. But it was also lonely in a way I hadn't expected. I remember standing in a supermarket aisle, surrounded by unfamiliar brands and accents and labels I couldn't read, and suddenly I started crying. Not because anything was wrong, exactly, but because in that moment I missed the ease of my old life, the quiet routines, the familiar streets, the friendly barista who knew my order without asking. I wasn't sad because I had made the wrong choice. I was sad because something in me had changed, and I hadn't caught up yet. That's the part we don't talk about enough. That space between who we were and who we're becoming. It's tender, it's confusing, and it's real. Sometimes when people leave jobs, relationships, cities, or identities that no longer fit, they expect to feel instant relief. And when they don't, when they feel grief instead, they assume they've failed. But grief is not a sign you've made the wrong decision. It's a sign you're in transition. You are mourning the death of a past self. And that mourning is essential. You can't step fully into what's next if you haven't honored what came before. This is why it's so important not to rush through the grieving. We live in a culture that celebrates reinvention, but rarely honors the in-between. We want to skip the ache and go straight to the transformation. But that ache, that quiet sadness is part of the process. It's not weakness. It's a reflection of the love you had for your old life and the costs you're paying to evolve beyond it. Growth and grief often walk hand in hand. They're companions in the same journey. And if you allow yourself to feel both without judgment, you'll find that you're not falling apart, you're falling into place. One layer at a time, one breath at a time, becoming not someone new, but someone more true. When you begin to grow, truly grow, there's something no one warns you about. You don't just outgrow roles or routines. You outgrow people. And that can feel like one of the most painful parts of evolving, because for a long time, those people were home. Friends who understood your stories, who laughed at your jokes, who cheered you on when you wanted the things they also understood. Family members who supported you so long as your choices looked like theirs. Colleagues who respected you as long as you played by the unspoken rules. You shared a language, a rhythm, a way of being that made sense. Until it didn't. And then something shifts. Maybe you want more meaning. Maybe you're drawn towards something uncertain. Maybe you just don't see the world the same way anymore, and you make a change. Maybe it's small at first. A new habit, a different goal, a bolder vision. And then, as you begin to grow into this new version of yourself, something surprising happens. Not everyone comes with you. Not everyone understands. Some people distance themselves, others get critical. Some smile politely while slowly fading into the background of your life. And it hurts. We like to think that the people closest to us will cheer us on no matter what. But the truth is, growth can be threatening to those who are still standing where you used to be. Not because they don't care about you, but because your evolution reflects something they may not be ready to face in themselves. I met a young man a few years ago. Let's call him Jordan. He had a full scholarship to play Division I basketball. To everyone around him, it was the dream. His parents were proud. His coaches believed in him. His community watched him like a hometown hero in the making. But somewhere deep inside, he knew it wasn't what he wanted. He loved the game, but he didn't want to make a career out of it. What he wanted, what he had always wanted, was music. He told his coach, he told his parents, he left the team. He walked away from a free education and a future that had been laid out for him since he was a teenager. And nearly everyone around him thought he had lost his mind. Friends stopped calling. His dad barely spoke to him. Former teammates told him he was throwing his life away. For 2 years, he worked 3 jobs to pay rent while recording music in a friend's basement at night. He faced rejection, self-doubt, and an overwhelming sense of isolation. He missed the comfort of belonging. But what he missed more was being true to himself. That same young man is now a Grammy-nominated producer. He tours with major artists. He creates music that moves people. But what stuck with me wasn't the success. It was the clarity he found in the struggle. He said, I had to choose between keeping everyone else comfortable and becoming who I knew I was meant to be. That choice is one of the hardest you'll ever make. Because when people say you've changed, it's often not a compliment, but what they don't realize is that change was never about leaving them behind. It was about finally catching up to yourself. You are not responsible for other people's comfort with your growth. You are not responsible for explaining every step you take, for defending your dreams, or for apologizing when your path looks different than theirs. Your job is not to make yourself smaller so others feel less insecure. Your job is to expand into who you're becoming. And that expansion will make some people uncomfortable. Let it. Not because you're better, but because you're different now. And difference has a way of disrupting the familiar. It challenges assumptions. It pushes boundaries. It reflects back what others may not be ready to see. And that's okay. People come into our lives for different reasons and different seasons. Some are meant to walk beside us for years. Others are there to teach us something in a moment. Just because someone can't walk with you through your next chapter doesn't mean they were never meant to be in the story. It just means their role has changed. This isn't about bitterness or blame. It's about understanding. It's about releasing the idea that everyone must understand your choices in order for them to be valid. The truth is, some of the most powerful transformations happen quietly, in spaces where no one claps, no one gets it, and you're still finding your footing. But in those moments, your integrity deepens, your voice strengthens, your alignment sharpens. And something incredible happens when you stop needing everyone to understand. You become free. You stop performing. You stop seeking permission. You stop compromising what matters just to maintain peace with people who no longer see who you are. Yeah. Because real peace doesn't come from being accepted by everyone. It comes from accepting yourself, even when that means walking away from comfort, familiarity, or approval. So if you're in that place right now, if you feel the tension of growing in a direction others don't understand, know this. It's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're finally doing something right. And while it may feel lonely, it's not forever. Growth makes space. And eventually the people who are meant to meet you at your next level will find you there. But first you have to get there without apology, without explanation, without shrinking. Because the world needs who you are becoming, even if the people around you don't quite see it yet. Here's the good news. Not the kind that comes with instant relief or quick answers, but the kind that settles in deeper with time. The kind that finds you when you're sitting in the quiet after the storm, wondering if everything you've let go of will ever be worth it. The kind of good news that doesn't erase the pain of what you've lost, but gives meaning to it. Because on the other side of loss is something you may not expect. It's not just peace, it's liberation. Everything you let go of on the path of growth, certainty, comfort, the validation you used to depend on, it doesn't just disappear into nothing. It clears space. And that space can feel terrifying at first. When the noise quiets and the distractions fade, what you're left with is yourself. And if you've spent a long time defining yourself by things outside of you, that moment of emptiness can feel overwhelming. But that same space becomes the soil for something bigger, something real, clarity, purpose, alignment. These are not just nice words we put on a vision board. They're anchors. And we only discover them when we've stripped away what no longer serves us, when we've chosen the uncomfortable truth over the comfortable lie, when we've stepped into the uncertainty that change demands and stayed there long enough to see what grows in its place. You don't just gain success on the other side of that kind of loss. You gain something far more powerful. You gain self-trust. That's the real reward. It's not the promotion or the recognition or the applause. It's the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you can do hard things, that you can survive letting go, that you can walk through fire, doubt, fear, disapproval, silence, and come out the other side not broken but more whole, not weaker but wiser, not smaller but more fully yourself. And self-trust, that's what allows you to build a life that actually belongs to you, a life that isn't shaped by fear or expectation or habit, but by choice. There's data to back this up. In a study conducted by Harvard Business Review, researchers looked at people who made what they called values-aligned risks. These weren't impulsive moves or reckless decisions. They were thoughtful, often difficult choices, where people left familiar paths in order to pursue something more meaningful, whether it was changing careers, moving to a new place, or ending long-standing relationships. And what they found was striking. Even when those transitions were hard, and many of them were, those individuals reported higher long-term happiness than those who stayed in misaligned situations for the sake of security. Why? Because they trusted themselves. They trusted that even if the road was unclear, it was worth walking. They trusted that growth was not supposed to feel good at first. They trusted that the discomfort was not a warning sign. It was part of the process. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't come from winning. It comes from walking away from what no longer fits and daring to believe that something better exists, even before you can see it. The truth is, growth won't promise you comfort, but it will give you something better. It will give you, your voice, your values, your vision without compromise. And once you've tasted that kind of liberation, you won't trade it for anything. Because once you've learned to trust yourself, the world opens up, not because it's safer, but because you know who you are in it. And that is the freedom we're all looking for. So if you're feeling the ache of change right now, if you're caught in that strange in-between space, no longer fully at home in your past, but not yet steady in your future, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are not failing. You are evolving. There is a deep, often unspoken truth about what it means to grow. It's not clean, it's not linear, and it doesn't always come with clarity right away. Sometimes it comes with tears, with confusion, with moments when you look in the mirror and don't quite recognize yourself. Not because you've lost who you are, but because you're in the process of becoming someone new. It's uncomfortable, it's disorienting, and it's normal. Real change doesn't just ask you to act differently, it asks you to be different, to think differently, to see yourself in the world through a new lens. And in order to do that, something has to crack open, just like a seed. When a seed begins to grow, the very first thing it has to do is break apart. It has to split from its shell, the thing that once protected it, in order to reach for the light, to reach for more. And if you saw that moment, just the cracking part, you might think something was going wrong. You might think the seed was being destroyed, but it's not. It's being transformed. That's what's happening to you. You're breaking out of what no longer fits. You're shedding old identities, old roles, old dreams that may have served you once, but no longer represent who you're becoming. And yes, that shedding comes with grief. That cracking open comes with pain, but that pain is not the end of your story. It's the start of your liberation. Because growth always feels like loss at first. It feels like leaving behind people who don't understand you anymore. It feels like questioning everything you used to be certain about. It feels like walking through a dark hallway without a map, hoping there's a door on the other side. But with every step, you learn something new about yourself. You begin to notice your own resilience. You hear your voice more clearly. You realize that you can stand on your own 2 feet without needing the approval or permission of the world around you. That's the quiet, powerful shift that happens when you stay the course. Not when you have all the answers, but when you're brave enough to keep asking the questions. When you don't rush back to what's familiar just to feel safe. When you learn to sit in the discomfort long enough to hear what it's trying to teach you. Because that ache you feel, that tension inside you, it's not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something is growing. You're not losing your way, you're finding it. And no, it won't be easy. There will be days when you miss the old version of yourself, days when you long for the clarity that certainty used to bring, even if it came with compromise. But certainty without alignment is just a comfortable cage. And you were never meant to live in a cage. You were meant to evolve. So don't run from the ache. Don't silence it. Don't numb it with distraction or bury it with self-doubt. Listen to it. Let it show you where you're no longer in integrity with yourself. Let it guide you toward what matters now. Let it pull you forward, not back. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your evolution. You don't need everyone to understand it. You just need to honor it. To trust that this uncomfortable, unfamiliar version of you is actually the most honest you've ever been and the most powerful. Because the future that's waiting for you, the one that's more aligned, more alive, more free, requires this version of you. The one who chose to walk away, the one who dared to question, the one who said yes to growth even when it felt like loss. That version of you, that's the real you. So keep walking through the grief, through the doubt, through the silence that often follows big decisions. You are not falling apart, you are falling into place. And on the other side of all of this, you'll look back and realize you weren't breaking down, you were breaking through. This isn't the end. This is the becoming. And your future, the one you can't quite see yet, but can feel calling to you, is already being shaped by the courage you're showing right now. So take the next step. However small, however uncertain, keep going. Because you're not losing. You're evolving.